I've always enjoyed the traveling to the different sites and seeing a lot of different parts of the country. That's sort of been my, I think, most enjoyable aspect of it. In addition just to the work itself, we've worked from, Trinidad and Puerto Rico all the way up to Alaska, Anchorage and Juneau and Ketchikan, and a lot of stuff in between. Seen some beautiful places and around Salt Lake City. I got to go see the Empire State Building on a project in New York. Just in the evenings, went with some of the other guys we're working with and took an elevator up to the top. Things like that, where you get to go do something I might not have done otherwise.
This is the first podcast that we're going to do, so it's going to be pretty, figure it out.
Right? It's a trial run.
It's a trial run, figure it out kind of thing. And this is first podcast, SES podcast. It's sponsored by Siva Corrosion Services. And, we're excited to be here. Thanks for the Siva Corrosion to do all this stuff for us. And we really want to give something back to the industry. We want to bring the people together, the designers, the constructors, the material suppliers, trying to figure out, where this industry is going, what the new methods and materials are evolving, and how do we best use those so that we can serve our client better. Because we're materials engineers, we want to make sure that we're doing things in a way that the new materials are being used properly, as well as the clients who are benefiting, the owners who are benefiting from those, and the designers who are aware that we can pull this together for them. That's kind of the idea. So what do you think about that, Stuart?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty excited about the opportunity to do a podcast and get into talking industry shop talk, and hearing from different perspectives and different folks on this, from different industries maybe that I don't interact with on a regular basis, that we can all kind of learn together, right? What is it like for a manufacturer of the materials or the construction, whereas we get more involved in the engineering and consulting side. So to see those different aspects and learn together, I think, is pretty interesting.
Right. So what do you think is new technology that's out there that you are aware of? I think the one thing that's really hot right now is the AI. And everybody's talking about AI. What do you think about that?
Oh, I know that's a topic that you like to talk about.
What about you?
Well, I think it's very interesting. I've been following it a little bit. To me, it seems like, at least in our industry, it's still a little bit of ways away to have a significant impact. I'm sure inevitably it will come, but not in the next year or two, I don't think. A lot of what I've seen the AI able to do at this point is synthesize a number of different sources into one. But really, I think in engineering, a lot of our job is figuring out which things apply to this specific job or this specific site, right? Mm-hmm. Where there's a decision point there that it's maybe not capable of yet. Where if you give it a very narrow focus, right, a specific task, AI can be very good at repeating that and generating something. But to synthesize and make the decision of this standard applies in this situation or that situation, and making that sort of decision, we're not quite there yet. So our job is safe for the time being. At the very least.
I was thinking that AI is primarily, it's a glorified Google, right? Google was able to, when you search something, it's able to find the relevant stuff, bring it to you. I think AI at this point, particularly as I've done some of the searches and kind of looking at different things in the AI, what AI can really do well is not only search, but synthesize the most relevant searches and answer your question related to all the data that's out there, synthesizing it. What's the consensus out there? So, for example, AI will miserably fail if the whole consensus itself is wrong. For example, 1,000 years ago, if AI was there and everybody thought that Earth was flat, and it's going to come up with Earth was flat. Yeah. That's kind of where it is. And so you're right. It's a little ways to go before it can actually infer things just like a human being can. So given that, particularly our industry where you really have to synthesize how the material function in a given environment under certain loading conditions and how the structure will respond to those. And that's still a state of the art. It's not a repository of knowledge that we could draw from. So that's interesting that you mentioned that. That's really neat.
Yeah, but I could also see it being very helpful with you get a 700-page document, right? Like you said, to be able to feed that in and maybe identify some key sections, right, for the different groups, whether this is geotech related or this is corrosion related, this is structural related. I think that could be pretty interesting if we were able to do that.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I can tell you, when I was doing the job posting and I would go into LinkedIn, hey, you want to use AI? And I said, okay. It went in and looked at all the job postings I've done in the past and came up with the job description for this particular title. And I looked at it. It's pretty close to what I would have written anyway. And I said, wow, in 1 second it came up with that. Okay, accept it, move on. And so that was really neat. We could do that. I think there are some areas that it still is, I find it interesting what it can do, but I don't know whether it can do what we do in the industry in terms of existing structure, trying to figure out what's ailing, where the data gap is. So tell me a little bit about yourself, Stuart, in terms of, where you started, where you went to school, and, what got you on this path? Talk a little bit about it.
That's an interesting question. I know we worked with someone, Joe Kish, who used to say people would fall into corrosion. And I feel like that happened certainly for me. Yeah. I went to school, Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh. Like maybe a lot of engineers, I was interested in a whole range of different topics. I took classes in mechanical engineering, civil engineering, electrical engineering, and chemistry, and a bunch of different things. And I wasn't sure which direction to go really when I first got there. So I liked always learning the new things, what's out there, what's different. And so I explored a number of different coursework when I was at school.
Yeah.
And was interested, did robotics, did programming, did electrical engineering, a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
So I hadn't quite decided really where I was going. But then when I was looking for an internship to get some real world experience, I guess, to put on my resume, basically, I reached out to someone I knew who connected me with you, that, in the town where I grew up in Westchester, Pennsylvania, that you might be looking for some help. And I thought, oh, well, that sounds kind of interesting. I don't really know anything about it, but I want to learn. And so I joined up at sort of I guess you would call it more of a startup at that point, right? It was just
pretty much
the three of us, working out of your house at that point.
Right.
A long time ago. We've grown a lot since then.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that's had a lot of fun. We got to travel. I got to do new types of engineering, and have to figure out a lot of different things as we go along. So that's sort of how I fell into it. Looking for a summer internship, some work just for a little bit of time, and got bit by the corrosion bug.
Well, from an intern, you come a long way. You manage pretty much all of the projects. How many projects you think you might have done by now?
Hundreds. I wouldn't know. Yeah, it'd be hundreds, I'd say. Not thousands, but somewhere in that. So I've been here since 2007. So,
wow.
16, 17 years now.
Yeah, yeah. So what do you think about our field? I mean, what do we do that a machine cannot do? Talk a little bit about that. Why could a machine not do what we do?
I think a lot of what we do is figure out the unique situations that aren't well documented. Using a material in a new environment, or what new materials might be available. So where we don't have full consensus yet, right? Well, there's a new, you have a new coating or a new corrosion protection method, and there might be some research available saying here's how it might work. But when you just have one study to go on, to be able to think, well, how is that study reliable? Can we draw from it? It's one thing, I think, to pull from a number of different studies and summarize, here's what the paper says, versus is that a valid conclusion, right?
Right.
And
right.
How applicable is it to our specific situation, or where might there be some other aspect that you need to think about, right? That's not discussed in that. So, I think, it's good at copy pasting. But then when you are looking at the new application or the new environment of an old, of an old technology, how is it going to work there?
That's interesting you would say that. Most people, when they're using AI, they're talking about how human error we got to eliminate. Talk about the Tesla automated cars. Like human error is so big that we can significantly reduce. But I think in our industry, even with the human error, it's a lot better than because there is not enough information for a machine to be able to synthesize and do what's the best course of action. That's interesting. That's pretty cool. Which project, do you think stands out in your mind?
There's a lot that stand out in my mind. There's the projects that have been challenging from the field, working in the field collection, right? We work outside on the bridge, so it could be snowing, it could be hot, and everything in between. The ones that always jump out at me is the coldest that I've worked was in northern Michigan, in February, where the high for the day was -12.
Yeah, that would have been nice and cold.
We still had to go to work. Bundled up as much as I still could only be outside for maybe 2 hours at a time.
Yeah,
It was just too cold. And the only thing that was going to stop us is when the equipment broke down.
How did you make the computer work?
Yeah, well, we gave the heaters were for the computer, not for us.
That's
We had
funny.
to keep the electronics warm enough to stay running. But as long as
man.
that was working, we would be out there working.
Yeah,
And bring it into the car to warm up a little bit when it got too cold.
that was which project was that in Michigan?
That was US 131 over
Yeah.
Muskegon, I think.
So what were you
Grand-
doing there?
Big Rapids. What were we doing? We were working on a box girder bridge. They were doing some installation of additional post tensioning.
Yeah.
And it required coring through the web of the box girder, which also had longitudinal post tensioning in it.
Yeah.
And whoever had done the work initially with ground penetrating radar to locate the tendons had not done some of the geometry right in their markings. And so when they cored through the web...
What do you mean by geometry? They didn't get it right.
Yeah, so the web is sloped, right? It's not perpendicular.
Okay.
So they were the holes they were drilling were going to be drilled level, level with gravity, and the webs are sloped then relative to perpendicular. So if you mark with the radar, it's going to identify directly beneath it, perpendicular to the surface that you're scanning. But then the hole that they're drilling is at an angle to that web. So based on the depth, you have to do a little trigonometry to figure out where do I need to put that core hole, so at the depth of the tendon, I'm going to miss it.
Okay, so is that what happened with the...
They had some errors in their marking just in general, but I think that was probably what was going wrong. I think with the technician that did that work is they marked it as if you're coring straight through it perpendicular to the wall rather than an angle.
Okay.
And so they clipped some of the tendons, and that immediately raised some red flags. So they stopped the work and they called us to come in and redo some of the locations.
So did you guys do it right? Did you nick a tendon?
I didn't hear about any other tendons hit, so I'm going to say pretty confidently that we must not have hit anything.
Oh, that's good. So you guys got it done.
Yeah.
That's good. That's one. So what's another project? That was pretty challenging, and but yet it was simple. Like if you know what you are doing, right?
Yeah.
And if you know that the web is sloped and you're scanning like this, and then you're drilling straight, you got to adjust that, where you're going to mark by that angle so you can still not hit anything.
Yeah,
So,
correct.
and that's what you did. That's good. And so what other project do you think that was challenging or interesting? So it was cold and it was crazy a little bit and got it done.
Well, that was on the cold side. Say on the hot side, we'll go with working in a paper plant in Georgia. It was February outside, so it wasn't actually hot outside, but we were working inside a building over a big boiling vat of something where there was tons of steam produced by this process, and all the steam would go up into the rafters of this pre-stressed girders, and was causing severe corrosion of the tendons there. So we had to go in and do some inspection of the tendons and document the level of corrosion and section loss, and take some samples. But so it was well over 100 degrees, like 110 degrees or so when we were there. They weren't able to shut down the work, so we kept going while they were producing, working overhead. And so it's 100% humidity. It's just steam on you all day. So you can put a fan on you, it doesn't feel like anything. It's just blowing hot air on you. There's no evaporation. You don't cool down at all. Yeah. And we were working 12-hour days. So that was just a brutal heat. We had and that project ended up taking a little longer, I think, than we initially expected, because the access conditions were so difficult. And so we actually called in some additional help from the office. Poor guy who had an intern who just started with us, and when he got there, it was so hot he couldn't stand it. He came in for 10 minutes and like almost passed out. We had to go send him home. We couldn't help out, so we just had to finish him.
You remember?
Colin.
Colin.
Yeah, okay. He was from the lab.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. So, anything else that stands out for you that you want to talk about? I know we're a non-destructive testing material firm. We evaluate bridges and things like that.
I mean, there's been a lot of great views in our projects. So we've worked on some cable stay bridges, particularly Quincy, Illinois, was a fun one where we got to work at the top of the tower. Yeah. So I think that was the highest bridge that I worked on, a few hundred feet up over the Mississippi. So we were up there scanning the cables, and you'd see a thunderstorm rolling in from miles away. So I got to get down from here quick before you're running any problems.
Yeah, that was cool. That was really good. I remember when we were working in Indiana in the box girders, and we used to have the 100-foot man lift, get right up to the manhole, and then we'd climb out into the box. And then one time we came back, and that man lift was about 8 feet below. Mm-hmm. You remember that?
Yeah.
And figuring out who was going to jump from there into that bucket to try to bring it up. There was a leak in the hydraulics. That was interesting. That was funny, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And tell me a little bit, who introduced you to SCS?
So I was introduced through my high school chemistry teacher, actually. He had gone to Carnegie Mellon. Oh. So that's how I had a connection to that school, and one of the reasons, just being a good engineering school in general, that I wanted to go there. And so he knew you, and so he connected us, knowing that you were looking for some help.
Right. Right.
So just looking out to local people that I knew in the area, because I wanted to be at home over the summer. Yeah. Rather than just an internship anywhere.
It's amazing, isn't it? The man I knew, he used to be in the same church that I was in. Mm-hmm. And so he moved from here to Maryland. And somehow he still remembered when you asked him. And he called me and said, "Hey, are you looking for somebody?" And I said, "Yeah." And that one little connection kept us connected for 17 years. Yeah. And I'm absolutely excited that you're a part of this team. And I don't think SES would be here where we are without you being a real important, ID for this firm. So I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate Jamie Leach.
Yeah, same.
And shout out to him, right? And sometimes you get those blessings, right, in life that, you don't really think about it, but then you look back 17 years and it's like, wow, that was really good, wasn't it? So what one project that you want to share that, you tell a story about why this was a fun project to work on?
They were all fun projects. I've always enjoyed the traveling to the different sites, and seeing a lot of different parts of the country. So that's sort of been my, I think, most enjoyable aspect of it, right? In addition just to the work itself, we've gotten to go we've worked from Trinidad and Puerto Rico all the way up to Alaska, Anchorage and Juneau and Ketchikan, and a lot of stuff in between. Seen some beautiful places and around Salt Lake City. I got to go see the Empire State Building on a project in New York, right? Just in the evenings, went with some of the other guys we're working with and took an elevator up to the top.
Yeah.
Things like that where you get to go do something, right, that I might not have done otherwise.
Yeah.
Go to a place that I wouldn't go. In Trinidad, after the work was over, we got to go down to the beach for one day. So you drive through the rainforest, over the mountains, down to the beach, and you got the shark bake. And grab a beer and relax on our day off.
That's nice.
Right?
That's nice. Sometimes it does happen. I mean, remember Puerto Rico when we was there and we loaded up all the equipment and they wouldn't release the equipment.
Yeah, they held it hostage. They were looking for maybe a little money to get it in.
A little money to get it in, but we weren't going to pay because we didn't have to pay the tax, and so we sat around for the whole afternoon and. Or maybe one day, a couple of days.
Yeah, it was a couple of days.
Couple of days. I remember that because that was interesting because I then said, hey, what am I going to do? So I went in and just kind of mingled with the locals and, talking to them about, their culture, the food, and that was pretty interesting. It was always fun to do.
Yeah, that was all of our key equipment we had to ship in. In Puerto Rico, they didn't have everything that we needed for this very specialized stay cable inspection, right? And it gets to the port, and they just say, "No, you can't have it. So we can't. We're all there."
They thought that we're going to sell the thing, and you got to pay the tax up front. I was like, "No, we're not selling. We're taking it back."
Yeah,
that was funny. And I know one other thing. I don't know whether you know this. In 1993, I used to work for a firm. This is my memory of one of the funnest project, but I had also a project that would have taken me off this place. It was the World Trade Center. I was working in the World Trade Center, and in '93 I had a project with the Port Authority of New York, New Jersey. I was working in the garage. I was scheduled to work in the garage, but I got sick the day before, and so I called him and told him, I'm really sorry, I'm sick. I won't be able to make it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so I was waking up late and putzing around and try to call him 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I said, hey, I could come the next day. Is that okay? He said, don't bother. What do you mean? We got a bomb that blow up the entire space and there's no more cathodic protection for you to look at. And so if I was there that day, I wouldn't be here talking to you. Wow. That was amazing. So there are things in life that happens for a reason. I think it's one of those things I remember, one significant project where I said, I'm sure God was still not done with me that day. That was interesting. I think, more I think about it, we've come a long way since that day when I was working there to all the way to today where we're talking about starting a new podcast. What are some of the things challenge-wise, like, the police came and got you, or, things like that happen? I got a couple of stories I want to tell you.
We could do a whole podcast on that. I mean, the biggest challenge is just being a small company. When we started, you just have to learn everything on your own. There's no one there to show you how to do it. Or teach you how to do it. You just have to figure it out as you go along, whether it's a new piece of equipment, a new process, a new inspection, new standards. You just have to read it and learn and teach yourself. But we've definitely had some challenges like that. I know, we work in DC a number of times, and around there, folks are a little more sensitive when you're just poking around infrastructure, right? Especially these days. So we've definitely had a number of times where, police come up and, well, what are you doing? Let me see your permits. All right, why are you here? What are you looking at?
Yeah.
And we've had that, and we've had worked in East Chicago, Indiana, around I guess the refinery was there, so they always had private security running around. And you gotta make sure to watch what you're doing and stay off of the wrong property.
Yeah, yeah. I remember one story. I'll tell you this. This is a crazy, interesting story. I was working on a railway track in DC, and I was supposed to measure the stray current. So I was supposed to connect a wire to the rail, and then to the half cell, and put the recorder for 24 hours, so it records for 24 hours. And then I didn't want to lose the recorder, and to protect it from the rain, I put them in an ammo box, which is what we had, and locked it up, and then chained it to the track.
Yeah.
And the guy was looking at it. He called the cops. The cops showed up, a whole bunch of them, and they took me. And they said, "Hey, you know what? You're going. What's going on here?" So I said, "So you got to call him. I'm working. I'm actually doing my job."
Yeah, I'm supposed
It's
to be
like,
here.
"Yeah, well, what's all this wire? What's all this box?" And so it took me 4 hours to get cleared on that day. I was thinking to myself, man, it's crazy out there, but thank God they were doing their job, making sure somebody's not trying to blow up the train tracks. So that was an interesting job where I was almost taken to jail. And it was scary, but it was good. It worked out. Well, do you have any thoughts for, young engineers? You've been there in this field for 17 years. You've done a lot of things. You've seen a lot of stuff. Any advice for young engineers, what they should do? And,
I would say just chase after what you find interesting. Find something that really engages you, and then put yourself into that, because that can carry you a long way when you have some interest in what you're doing. And I know a lot of engineers want to get into engineering. It's a profession that most people seek to learn from. But yeah, explore the different options out there. You don't have to be in the field that you studied. Most people don't end up in that anyway.
Right.
So you could study something that's a good baseline, but then you find a career and a path that really engages you,
Right.
and holds your interest. Because doing something like this, it gets such varied work, working in different states, different bridges, different projects, different equipment. Every day is a little different. It's stressful a lot of times because it all falls on us. To wear 10 different hats and get everything done. And there's not a department that I can hand it off to take care of that for me. I just have to do it myself.
Right.
But that keeps it engaging and interesting, so that I can do it for 17 years and counting.
Yeah, that's great. I think you're right. You got to find something that you really like and that engages you so that it'll pull you forward every single day. I mean, there are things that you have to do that's just everyday thing you have to do. But that's part of every project, every job that you take. But it'd be nice to have something that you come to. It's like, what am I dealing with it today? It's different, It's always a detective work trying to figure out. And that's what keeps us engaging. But that's what keeps stress level a little higher because you never are, just coasting. You're always learning. You're always thinking. You're always doing stuff to make sure that you're really addressing the problem and not, wasting time or money for our clients. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk today. And I think, our goal is to always work for the client, to make sure what we do benefits the client and it also spends the least amount of money, least amount of time, and more safe way so we collect information so they can benefit from it. And the goal is to extend the service life of this infrastructure that we have in this country, one of the greatest infrastructure in all of the world. And so thank you. I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you.
Maybe until next time, we'll see you again.